Welcome back, friends. This is Steph. Welcome back to another episode of the Pup and Away podcast. I'm very happy that you're joining us for yet another episode. I am a certified dog trainer, canine behaviorist, canine nutritionist, and the very proud owner of Pup and Away, where we specialize in pet care with the behavioral edge in San Antonio, Texas. And today I am joined by Lisa Tully, an animal healer, professional animal communicator, and holistic practitioner based in Ireland. Her accent is amazing. Lisa's lifelong connection with animals began early and has taken her on an incredible journey, from working in veterinary practice in Dublin to a career in pharmaceuticals to living deep in the Bolivian rainforest caring for a young ocelot named Millie. Her path later led her into meditation, Tibetan spiritual study, animal communication, shamanic healing, traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, and zoopharmacognosy. I probably said that incorrectly, but it's the practice of allowing animals to self-select the botanicals they need for healing. Today, Lisa blends intuition, energetic healing, Chinese medicine, food therapy, botanical selection, and collaboration with holistic veterinarians to support animals physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Her work is rooted in helping animals be deeply heard, understood, and supported, while also helping their guardians heal and grow alongside them. I thought it was a very eye-opening conversation, very beautiful, very gentle, and maybe listening to it can help heal you in some sort of way. But without further ado, let's get into our episode with Lisa Tully. All right, listeners, thank you for joining us again for another episode. I am here today with Lisa Tully. Tully, right? Not Tully?
Yeah, Tully, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So tell us a little bit about you, Lisa.
Hi, Steph. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me on here. I'm very excited to be here, and for all your listeners listening in, welcome. So my situation is I'm in Ireland at this moment, and I work from Ireland remotely, helping and supporting sick dogs and sick cats. And I do that through a variety of skill sets that I have. And I'd say the main ones that stand out would be I am an animal communicator, and I also practice zoopharmacognosy, which is animals self-selecting the botanicals they want to work with. And I also use Chinese medicine, 5 elements Chinese medicine for animals, and I use Chinese herbs and flower essences and food therapy. So it goes on and on and on. So basically, any animal that shows up in my sessions, I can have a good go at helping them feel better.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that we have lots of things to talk about. So let's get started. What is your background? Have you always been like mainly an animal person? Were you kind of working in a different industry before this?
That's a really good question. So, as a child, I was always an animal person, and so when I was in school, I did work experience at a vet's, and I was doing it for 2 weeks, but I ended up staying for 2 years. And that gave me a real insider into the industry. I was like assisting in surgery, minding cats, working reception, giving injections. Like it was just an all, basically they trained me up to do things that a nurse would do. But my official title was nurse's aide. And it was just phenomenal because it really helped me see the tough job that is. And so I wanted to do veterinary medicine, but in Ireland the points are extremely high, so I didn't get them. And I ended up doing a degree in chemistry and biology. And because I got an honours degree, I then got accepted into vet school in the University of Liverpool in the UK. But something stopped me, Steph. I was just like, the fees are super high. And you know what? I just think it was my soul telling me not to do it. Like it was
Yeah.
the best thing ever, because I think it's an extremely hard job. All my friends, some of my closest friends are vets, holistic vets, and my God, are they up against it. So I ended up going into pharma and with my science degree, and pharma was an amazing experience because it, as a pharmaceutical sales rep, you're over prepared for anything life throws at you. You just become this machine. They train you into this machine. So that business savviness and understanding the medical language understanding chemistry. I used to sell drugs based off clinical trials to professors and consultants in the hospitals in London. So I lost all fear of the white coats, and nothing's by accident. So when I left that industry because it didn't suit me, I started going deeper into animal healing work. And then that meant, with that type of a background, I'm really able to understand the pharmacology of the drugs that all the animals are on, understand all the bloods, understand what the vets are thinking, have conversations with the vets. So it's just amazing, you know. And so that's kind of the rock I jumped off, I suppose, into the ocean of holistic medicine for animals.
That's super cool. I've had one other animal communicator on here. She was vet tech, animal communicator. I just love that layered approach because you have a different set of skills and mindset to be able to connect these dots that I think most people think are so far off, right? The intuitiveness, the communication, but then also the big vet piece as well. So to be able to connect those dots, I think, is something very special, and I applaud you for that. How long have you known that you had the gift of communicating with animals, and what did that manifestation look like for you?
I think I was always very intuitive as a child, and animals have always behaved differently around me. Maybe a very scared cat would let me pick them up, that kind of thing. So it's always been in me. And the way I was, like, when I was a toddler, well, the first time I was brought into a butcher's shop, I screamed. I just lost the plot. And my mother's like, "What's wrong with this child?" And then I just begged and begged and begged to be vegetarian. And eventually, at the age of 12, she let me. So it was like, it's just this, I brought it in from another lifetime, right? When little kids behave that way at that age, that's not new.
Yeah.
But I did have a very challenging upbringing, so it's like my more intuitive side didn't really have chance to breathe, right? So it wasn't until I became a young adult and I moved away and I started to have access to teachers in London when I lived there, and then I started really meditating, and then I realized, what was there. It was just always there. I just needed to turn my attention towards it, and have the space to do that. So yeah, this is definitely something I've been doing for many lifetimes. Like, yeah, it runs very deep. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. I know communicators and mediums and different, modalities that connect with, I guess, beings from a different realm, if that's how you would put that, kind of get information and messages in different ways, like through pictures or sounds. How does that kind of manifest for you? How are you receiving those signals and messages?
For me, I hear them initially through telepathy. So I'll hear full sentences and conversations. So that was the first thing that appeared into my awareness when I really started dialing into this. And then, so when I work with the animals, I hear full sentences from them. And now, as I've progressed in my spiritual healing, let's say, so that my heart energy gets stronger and more open, now I'm really feeling things like in the sense of almost like a medical intuitive. So if I'm working with an animal, I say it like jokingly, it's like I put on my x-ray glasses and I just kind of close my eyes and I scan the energy of the animal, or I ask them to bring my awareness to the organ that most needs support, or organs. And or sometimes it'll come in just as an instant knowing. Like, I was working on a dog there last week in an animal communication session, and the lady, senior dog, and she wasn't quite sure what was going on for the dog, and the moment I just looked at the dog's photo, I just heard cognitive decline. Yeah, and then when I said that to the lady, she goes, "Oh my God, that's it." And then I helped her join all the dots, then using my insights into Chinese medicine. So I'll filter between the right brain and the left brain. Yeah, so images come, feelings, sensations in my body. We have one of the horses here last night was sick and was kind of walking sideways across the field, and I was just like, uh-oh. So I rang their guardian, And I just knew straight away. I said, that horse has a virus. So, you know, the immune system's down, and being able to help the horse then, you know, that way. So it's really, yeah, whatever way it needs to come in, it'll come in. And I'm always just open to it being whatever. At this point in my life, I'm just like, I just close my eyes and I just say, show me.
Just your open heart, open mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I've always been curious to learn a little bit more about is when animals are choosing to do like self-selection of botanicals and just their herbs and their medicine. And, you know, I see my kiddos doing this kind of often, Rishi specific. So I have two schnauzers. One of them's named is Rishi. She's named after the mushroom, of course. And she, you know, she goes outside, and sometimes she wants to eat the grass, and sometimes she doesn't. And she goes to specific areas for grass. So, you know, she's definitely self-selecting there. But I also like to joke that she is like a poop connoisseur, because like she likes cat poop, and she will also eat the rabbit poop that we have out in the backyard in certain areas or certain times of the year. But she doesn't eat her own poop. She doesn't eat other dogs' poop. She's, you know, she doesn't eat my other dog's poop. You know, she's just very like, if anything, she's like disgusted by that. So I see her self-selecting often, and I've had some conversations with clients. I'm more of a trainer than anything, a behaviorist and a trainer. And so we kind of have those conversations, and people, I think, don't often realize that our dogs are smart enough to realize what it is that they need, and they're doing some self-selecting there. So could you kind of guide us through what is self-selecting, and then what kind of like, what does that process for the animal look like, as far as what behavior should we be seeing, or maybe what's going on in their own little brains?
And do you know what the cats, is it your cat that, you know, is it your cat that the dog eats the poop of?
No, it was actually in a different house when we had a bunch of stray cats, and they'd come into the yard and
Okay.
like potty in the flower beds. But we don't live there anymore, so she doesn't have access to those cats. We
Okay.
actually no cat
Yeah.
food right now.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like a lot of the cats, especially stray cats, there's to answer your question, I'll give, you know, use your dog as an example, right? What I would say possibly could be going on, is that if there's someone feeding the stray cats, right, you usually have a kind neighbor that'll feed the stray cats. Otherwise, how are they going to survive? And that'll probably be a lot of kibble. Okay, because it's easy and they could feed them in bulk. So if in animal self-selection, the animals will pick up the smell and the scent of something that they need, whether it's the herb, the plant, the herbal powder, the food, anything like that. And they're able to understand the therapeutic properties of these botanicals, let's say. So they'll instinctively know which ones their body needs. So that's one layer of zoopharmacognosy. So if the dog is selecting cat poop, chances are the kibble isn't digested a whole lot. So the cat's kibble is probably got, the cat's poo probably has a lot of the kibble still in it, right? So the dogs will often eat animals that have been eating a lot of kibble, because it's just kind of like fat, right? Fat and carbs, that kind of stuff. But then what's interesting is, you know, they will self-select also the grass, as you mentioned, or the dandelions, or whatever it is they need. So if they're eating the rabbit poop, it's very different. When they eat the poop of a herbivore, often they'll eat horse poop as well, which is actually really good for them, because it's full of lots of prebiotics and things like that. So yeah. So it's like them taking, you know, a supplement, let's say. So they're able to do that. But like I took it to the next level. Like when I first learned zoopharmacognosy, so if you put out 3 bowls of, say, hydrosols, and hydrosols would be like floral waters. So if you make an essential oil and you put steam through the plant, and what rises to the top is water and the essential oil. So they'll, out of that still, they'll take out the essential oil part and sell that as an essential oil. And the water part used to just be a waste product, the hydrosol. And now they're recognizing that it has a lot of beautiful therapeutic effects. So if we put out a bowl of ginger hydrosol, a bowl of yarrow hydrosol, and a bowl of geranium hydrosol, the animal will go towards the bowl that they instinctively know their body needs. So when they smell it, it goes up into the olfactory system, which is the smelling system. then it goes into the limbic part of the brain. And the limbic part of the brain is the oldest part of the brain, and it's where we all store memories and emotions. So they just instinctively know which hydrosol is going to help them heal their trauma, their emotional wounds, whatever it is. And when it goes to the nose, the olfactory system, it also goes into the blood system. And then it'll start to bathe the organs and things like that. So they just have this inherent ability. Wild animals as well, which is really where this comes from. They just know what plants. And I believe that like a lot of the indigenous healers and shamans and things like that, like of course they're watching what the animals have been doing with the plants to learn, as well as communicating directly with the plants themselves, and the plants telling the healers, the native healers and local people as well, what it is that the plant actually does. So I believe that also the animals themselves have the ability to communicate with plants, because plants are alive, okay, and they have a consciousness. And everything has a consciousness. All of nature has a consciousness. So if we are, for example, going out into nature and we're going to harvest some wildflowers or some wild herbs, it's really important to ask the plant permission before you do that. Because if you don't, I believe that you can create a lot of bad juju for yourself, bad energy. So you just lick your fingers and then put your fingers onto the plant so the plant can feel your energy and your vibration. And then you ask, do I have permission to harvest some of you, but not all of you? And you wait for a yes or a no. And if you tune into that, you'll feel it. So that on a human level might feel a little bit far out there for a lot of people, but the animals are just second nature at this. Mm-hmm. There's no placebo effect with them. And what I've started to do is when I first did the ZooCog, I had some like holistic vets say to me, oh yeah, ZooCog will work for only plants that have an aroma, or, botanicals that have an aroma, but it won't work for, say, homeopathy, right, which has no aroma. It won't work for flower essences, which have no aroma. Flower essences are basically vibrational water, so they're different to floral waters, which are the hydrosols. But then I started playing around with the zoopharmacognosy and offering animals homeopathy to self-select, right? And then flower essences, and they very clearly show the exact signs. So if you offer a botanical and the animal wants it, they'll sniff, they'll lick their lips, they'll yawn, whereas if they don't want it, they'll literally turn away from it. They won't even sniff it. Mm-hmm. So because I had that understanding of what a yes looks like and what a no looks like, then when I started doing that with homeopathy and stuff, I realized, oh my God, it works for homeopathy. So then I trained and taught some of my homeopathic vet friends how to do it with their animals. And now what they do is when they're in their clinical practice, because only vets can prescribe homeopathy, when they're in their clinical practice and they've kind of repertorized maybe 2 possible remedies, 3, they'll get them out and they'll offer and they'll look for the zoopharmacognosy yes, and it nails it every time, right? It's made their practice more effective. So this is kind of, ZooCog is just this, it's like a way of just double checking you're right on a human level, and it can avoid mistakes then, right? So if the animal doesn't want a particular remedy because it's not the right one, they don't want a particular herb, they don't want a particular Chinese herb, I trust that. I go, well, I've got as much knowledge as I think I do. Yeah. But then it ultimately lands with the animals. So I really pay attention if they'll work with one herb that I want them to take and they don't work with the other. It's not about disguising it in the food, finding a way to slip it in. It's like, no, listen to their no, because they're saying yes here. Mm-hmm. And they're saying no here. So I need to go back to the drawing board. I need to do a better job for that animal.
I love that. Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit in playing around with different herbs with my older schnauzer, Sully. He's 16 and has arthritis. And, trying to find the right way to support him. And, I'll grab something that I looked at the energetics of it all. And I'm a huge lover of Rita Hogan and her work. And it's funny, I'll try something with him and he'll just flat out be like, nope, hard no. And I'm like, okay, noted. I just spent $17 on this and it'll just go in the trash. Thank you. Or, well, yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll try to find another client maybe who can benefit from that, but it's very interesting. I think it's hard a lot for, I guess the pet parents like me who are more consumers. I will buy something. I don't have the knowledge to go and forage and self-pick and different things like that. So how do people like me who are buying stuff, or maybe even herbal combinations and blends, like how do we kind of go around that with our animals?
That's a good question because that's what I usually do for my clients, right? It's like
Yeah.
I will tell them which supplements to get,
Yeah.
right? Because I've
How
asked the
you?
animal, right? So that's that kind of intermediary. And then people's animals are well, because I've taught them how to look for a yes and how to look for a no, then they can just do it themselves, right?
Yeah.
But the answer that's coming from me when you were asking that question is that it's about us trusting what we're feeling. So before we click buy, okay, on whatever product it is we want for our animal, it's like just taking a breath and taking a moment and going into yourself and asking your dog, your cat, your horse, do you want this? And then it's like, look, this is the trick I show people, right? I say, okay, let's close your eyes, breathe. And then I say, go into your heart space and just take a few breaths in your heart. And then what I want you to do is feel the love you have in your heart for your animal companion, and they'll feel the love. And then I say, okay, with your eyes still closed, ask your animal companion to show you a yes in your heart space. And more often than not, it'll be really clear, it'll be expansive, they'll breathe, there'll be something there. And then I say, okay, with your eyes still closed, ask your animal to show you a no. And chances are the heart energy kind of, or you might feel a constriction in your throat, or you might feel an expansion in your body. Not everybody's able to connect with the heart. So you can use your whole body as a pendulum, let's say. But practicing that, ask your animal, show me a yes, show me a no. And it's clear as day for most, especially women. Men might struggle with it a little bit, to be honest with you, but the women, they're just boom, right? So then when you're buying online, you're looking at a product, you just close your eyes and just ask your animal, show me a yes, show me a no. Do you need this product? And see if it's a yes or a no before you click buy. Yeah.
So me, someone that has two different dogs, would Sully's yes be different from Rishi's yes? Like, would I possibly
Yeah.
get something a little bit different from
You
them?
could do. You could do. Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why work the muscle,
Okay.
get their yeses, get their nos, and just practice it. Like have fun with it.
Yeah, that
Don't,
sounds great.
yeah. And just try it out then. Next time you're going to buy something or buy a food or whatever it is, you go, you know what? I'm just going to ask Sully.
Yeah.
And then see how the response is when you've ordered some of Rita's precious products.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And then hopefully when it arrives, it's a yes, and then you'll start to fall back on that much more. And then, do you want to sit this pet sitter? Yeah. Do you want to go to the vet? Do you want to go to the park? It's endless then, looking for the yes, looking for the no. You can start to communicate with your animal on a much deeper level.
I love that. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's certain patterns with, like, do anxious dogs tend to gravitate towards specific botanicals? Do dogs who are in physical pain tend to gravitate more? Like, do you see patterns in different things like that?
Well, it depends actually, because you see, if you look at yarrow, right? Let's just pick yarrow for an example. It's a really well-known herb, and it'll be all. I'm sure it's definitely in Rita's book, and it's like it grows as a sacred wild flower here that other people may call a weed, but it's one of the most powerful plants. And it's got the Latin name Achillea millefolium because it's connected to the Romans. So the Romans, as in Achilles' heel. Okay, so when Achilles went into battle for his soldiers, when they got wounds on the battlefield, they would chew on the yarrow, make a bit of poultice, and stick it into their wounds because it stops bleeding, and it also heals up wounds very, very quickly. And yarrow in itself, though, doesn't just work on physical wounds. It'll also work on deep soul wounds, deep emotional wounds. So an animal who maybe is not at the stage where they have physical conditions, but they may have emotional trauma, they'll select yarrow, and it could be for that reason. And if they're working with yarrow for like an emotional issue, if they're sniffing the hydrosol or the very diluted down essential oil, I never recommend you use pure essential oils with animals or without professional guidance. If they're sniffing the yarrow, they're working on emotional stuff. But then if they start to want to lick and ingest the yarrow, they're working on physical stuff. So if an animal is arthritic, okay, like your dog, yarrow can be really good for that because it moves the blood. And what's happening in an arthritic dog usually is there's stagnation of the blood. And when the blood is stagnated, the muscles contract. They're not, moving the way they're supposed to do. And that causes misalignment of the bones. And then the bones start to rub against each other at the wrong angle. And that develops arthritis. So because yarrow heals wounds and stops bleeding, it has this affinity. Like if you actually look at the plant itself, it looks like loads of little veins, right? So that's the doctrine of signatures, when plants, just looking at them, can tell you what they actually work on. Yeah. So for me, it's a really interesting question what you've asked, and it just depends on the individual animal what they choose to use that plant for. And I have learned over the years to just trust their animal wisdom and just go, oh, right, I wonder why you're using that. I don't know. I can only guess, but it seems to help. Yeah.
I love that. How much into mushrooms are you?
So for me, I don't know enough about mushrooms. I'm a huge advocate of them. My friend Angelina Ardolino, she makes a beautiful Yeah, so she's a legend. So she makes a really good range of mushrooms. And I've heard her speak on them to my community. And yeah, it's really a magical thing, but for me at the moment, I'm going down the rabbit warren of herbs, Chinese herbs, essential oils, and that's so that's for me. I think whenever you're tapping into any of these magical resources and you find the right road that works for you and your animal and you're using quality products, all roads lead to Rome.
I love that. Yeah, your episode actually comes right after my second episode with Angela Ardolino.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit, and because you've mentioned traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, which is a very big topic of interest for me, but it's not hard. It's layered and nuanced and maybe even a little complicated. So I guess, can you give a really quick rundown for the listeners of what we are talking about when we talk about traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, and kind of more importantly, speaking to the 5 elements?
Okay, so there, when you're, yeah, it is like, but in a nutshell, right? When you're learning Chinese medicine, you'll start off like with some fundamental principles. And one of the fundamental principles is the 5 elements. So that would be the starter. But then when it gets more interesting and more in depth, that's when it starts to go into either traditional Chinese medicine. But then if you want to go even broader, you've got classical Chinese medicine, which still has all the spiritual and the emotional aspects to it, as well as all the traditional Chinese veterinary medicine aspects to it. So they say that animals are so much easier to heal than people, that 5 elements Chinese medicine can go a long way with them. Whereas us humans, we're far more complicated and far more resistant to healing and doing the work we're meant to do here on this earth. So that the deeper work needs to happen, the deeper tools, and that's where like traditional Chinese medicine. But then you do have these wonderful vets that are trained as traditional Chinese veterinary medicine vets. So they have the whole tools, in their toolbox that traditional Chinese medicine offers. But for me, I think in a nutshell, to give you an idea, when I'm working with an animal, I like to try and determine which element they are out of the 5 elements. So you've got earth, metal, water, wood, and fire. So if you have an earth dog, they tend to be a little bit pudgy and they love food. They don't tend to have many emotional issues. They're not, they don't really, well, they do have emotional issues, but they're the ones that might have the big challenging behaviors. They're not like that. They just want to be at home and cuddle in with the family, but they may worry a lot and they may have a bit of separation anxiety. And once you know an animal is an earth element, so the earth would be connected to the stomach and the spleen, for example. So they will have a propensity to have issues with those organs. So this is in a very simplistic form, right? So you can really understand then, you go down the road then of Chinese medicine, food therapy for animals, and you start to use earth foods to feed those organs to help that animal come back into balance. So yeah, do you want me to go through the other four elements? Is that useful?
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, okay. So then after the earth you have the metal element. So that would be the lungs and the large intestine. So their key emotion would be grief. And these animals, they tend not to have huge behavioral issues either. However, they have a lot strong boundaries and they like things to be in order and to happen in a certain way. And they'll have quiet complaints. And if you pick up on their quiet complaints, all is well. But if you don't and you keep pushing them, even unknowingly, they can have a bit of an outburst, a bit of an edge to them. But they're the animals you got to really watch if they have a big grief. Okay, so if they lose one of their friends or their guardian, or they've had many homes, things like that, IBD, all this stuff going on, or if you're grieving and they take on your grief, and then lo and behold, they've got megacolon and all this kind of stuff going on. So you want to watch them in that way. And then the waters, these are probably the most clients I'd say I work with, waters and fires, because waters, now you have big emotional problems and challenging behaviors, because water element is based on the kidneys and the bladder, and their main emotion is fear. So they can get deeply, deeply fearful, and they're usually survivors. So they've usually had a major trauma that they've survived. And they will be the hardest to read. They'll be quiet, 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 and they're frozen almost in their fear. But then they're the most likely to give you a serious bite or a serious kick. So once you recognize you're working with a water as a practitioner, you're kind of a little bit, you have to be aware of that. And they will more likely have a propensity towards things like arthritis, deafness, because the kidneys rule the bones and the kidneys rule the ears and things like that. So musculoskeletal issues, spinal deformities, and so much more. Kidney issues, obviously, bladder issues, all that kind of stuff. But they're gorgeous. Like, when you heal them, you heal them with their traumas. They're also the most wise, yeah, because if you think about the ocean goes in and then the tide goes out. So they have a panoramic view. They've got a lot of wisdom and they see the full picture. So I've got a very special place in my heart for waters. And if they bond with you, they're your ride or die friend. They really, really are. And then you've got the next ones are the woods, and they're really interesting because the wood element is the liver and the gallbladder. And that's the organ of anger. So here we have more behavioral stuff that can kick off. But they're more bark than bite. The waters will bite. The woods more than likely will bark. But they can be a bit tricky as well, in all fairness. And, so many animals have liver issues, liver qi stagnation. So it's a big organ, right? And it's about helping them keep their livers in check, making sure that a wood element animal, because the liver is going to be a very more sensitive probably in them, make sure you're really, really feeding them a good diet. You feed all animals a good diet, but they're going to find it harder, I suppose, to detox drugs and things like that. So you have to be aware of these guys in that sense. And then you have the fires, which are again, you could have massive behavioral issues with a fire. A fire element is there. If you think about fire itself, it's beautiful to look at. You're drawn into the campfire. Okay, oh wow, isn't it so gorgeous? That's the way fire element animals are. Everybody loves them and they're like, oh, look at their beautiful silky coat. So, and they're also the life, they can be the life of the party. So when someone comes to the door or their friend is around, they get overexcited, right? It can tip into hysteria though, or they can be super shy. And the organs is like the heart and the small intestine, and then they're connected to the thyroid and the adrenal, so the endocrine system. So they can have heart imbalances, they can have small intestine imbalances, endocrine imbalances. So you have to, also they get very heated, they can overheat, as can the woods. And yeah, but sometimes if an animal comes with a water imbalance, you're never quite sure if it's a fire or water. You have to wait and see as you heal them, which is actually their true constitutional element. Because we all have 5 elements in us, but there's usually one as our main element and then a second one as our sub element, let's say.
Right. I think that's, for me, that's the hardest part to understand. Like, I think, for example, my little one Rishi, I think she's a fire element. She's very vocal and spicy, and someone walks in through the door, she's welcoming them. I like to joke that she used to be like a radio talk show host in her past life. One, she's a schnauzer, I mean, come on, but she just has like this vibrant like spice of life. But she's also a dog that, because fire dogs usually tend to be hot in nature, right? They're more like, their energetics are warm, but her energetics are definitely more on the cool side. She likes to burrow, she likes to be under blankets. So it's all these like little nuances, and I mean, just like everything else, it's a very layered approach. So whenever you're trying to determine a dog's character or their element, what sort of, are you looking at physical attributes, personality, behavioral traits, all of the above? Like what do you try to pinpoint when
Yeah. So I'm looking at all of that. Their character traits, what they're like physically. Like waters, sometimes usually have big feet, and kind of melting eyes, like a teardrop, right? So they have big feet. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, much bigger it's interesting, isn't it? And then, so I'll be looking at kind of these character traits and these physical traits. But yeah, for me, I suppose also like the behaviors, like, so although a fire dog will be hot, for example, like you're saying, it's more complex than that. Like sometimes they can be constitutionally, they are hot, but something might be going on in their body that they're actually feeling cold, right? So if your dog really loves burrowing under the blankets, and maybe does your dog like to lie in the sun as well?
He loves to lay in the sun.
Yeah. So what that's showing is that the kidneys, that's a kidney thing, right? So they're probably running cold, and they're trying to heat up the kidney energy, because the water element is cold. And that, like I was saying, the water and the fire are very interchangeable. Okay, so she might be a fire element animal with a kidney imbalance,
right? Or maybe was that yawn deficiency, right? Deficiency of warmth.
Yeah, yin and yang for sure. But they can also be hot or cold. Like it doesn't necessarily. Yeah, they can be yin and yang deficient. Like it's so complicated, which is why it takes so long to really nail this stuff. I'm just like, I wish I had 3 lifetimes, right? I wish I had 3 more lifetimes to really go deeper into Chinese medicine. That's how complicated it is.
Yeah.
But they can be a constitutional fire with a water imbalance. Right, so they may run high, may be all excited, all that stuff, but then there's something going on with the kidneys, because everything is connected.
Right, you have the parent and the grandparent, like
the
sub element. Okay,
exactly.
It's all very interesting stuff, and like you said, I want to keep learning more and more, and every time I uncover one layer, it opens up 2 or 3 other doors, and I'm like, okay, I gotta remember to go back and read more about that. But I love that you said the water dogs tend to have big feet.
Yeah.
I think that's so cute. Now I'm thinking about some dogs, and I'm like, yeah, they do have big feet.
Yeah.
And like you, I think I work a lot with water and fire dogs as a behaviorist. I have the really fearful dogs, or the dogs who are more just like reactive and triggered by life.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of them around at the moment, isn't there?
There seems to be more, and I think, and again, that's a whole layered approach as to like what are we feeding and what kind of imbalances are we creating with just our normal lifestyle with vaccines and toxin exposures and all that kind of stuff, because there's just so many different things that go into it for sure.
Oh yeah, you have to look at the whole being, right?
For sure. Which kind of leads us to my next question. So, do you find that behavioral issues often improve when the physical body is supported through the right food, botanicals, and elemental balancing? Like, one thing, like I said, first and foremost, I'm a dog trainer and behaviorist. And when I started to learn more about food therapy and nutrition, that unlocked a whole nother something that I was missing. I didn't realize I was missing, but I was missing in my behavioral training. And now learning more about TCVM and herbs and mushrooms. I kind of like to think of myself as a holistic behaviorist, where I'm not just looking at the behavior and what can we teach the dog, but a more layered approach to all of those things. So what do you kind of think about supporting the dog holistically, and which modalities do you see some making more of a difference than others?
I feel that all of you, everything that you've mentioned there is really important. Okay, and like it's like the diet is probably like I have supported extremely sick animals through food therapy. Okay, to the Chinese medicine food therapy on top of the botanicals. Like the botanicals and the herbs will take you so far, but then what really sustains the animal, I believe, is the food, the diet. Beyond that, however, one ingredient that I'd say I would add in extra on top of everything you mentioned, because I think it's all equally as important: detoxing, reducing chemical load, is making sure the animal is not living in a stressful environment or being stressed out for whatever reason. But it's also really looking at both ends of the lead. Right, so it's like it's what's going on, what's going down the lead from the person. And this is where the animals have led me over the years. Like I'm 15 plus years now working with the animals in this way. And I discovered that I could do everything I wanted to do with the animals, but then I was just getting such serious cases that the animals just weren't shifting, whether they're emotional or physical, despite all the stuff that I'd done, all the good stuff. So that's when I started to turn my attention towards the other end of the lead as well. And the way I do that is I ask the animals when they're self-selecting their botanicals, and so I do all this remotely through their photo. I then ask them, okay, so this is what you want, but what do you feel your dog mom needs? What flower essence mix does she need? And by doing that, then you start to relieve the animal of whatever is going down the lead. So it's the human to animal mirroring. And if the people are open to that, and then they take that gauntlet from the dog and run with it, or the cat or the horse, and they really start to look at their stuff and really work on it, getting their own acupuncture, getting their own coach, their own therapist, whatever it is. There's so many ways of doing this stuff, but I find the clients that really listen, and of course I'm using animal communication as well, so the messages are powerful that are coming from the animal, and they're like, it's literally, why is my dog throwing me under the bus? And I'm just like, well, and we make a joke out of it, like, and they're just like, I'm not bringing you to a party, Lisa, when the dogs are there. Like the dogs will all be, telling all the tales. So we just, we keep it easy breezy and light, and we go deep when we need to. But then it's really about, if you don't change your ways, you will continue to send whatever it is down the lead. So the animal will get better to a point, but then if you go back to your old ways, their symptoms will start to return
Right. Yeah.
gradually.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that literally was my next section, was talking about, how not, my clients like to joke, like, I know it's all my fault. Like, yes, but no. I think We need therapists and, life coaches, just like you said, for a reason. I don't have all the answers. We ourselves don't have all the right answers. So it's hard to know, what exactly we need to fix in ourselves without seeking some of those additional helps. But, I have one client in particular who she has, he's probably like a year and a half now of an Aussie, and he grew up in my puppy preschool program, and so I've known him since he was a baby. He will always, was a little bit shy and reserved, but not super like anxious. But of course, as he goes through adolescence, he had one reactive moment on the leash, and I was talking to his mom, and she was like, Steph, all of my past traumas of dealing with that from my previous dog all came flooding back. And so now the two of them, I've had to work with them of like, they're a team, right? My human client needs to understand when she's getting nervous and anxious and how that's feeding into her dog, who's also like, okay, well, if you're unsafe and if you're uncomfortable, then someone's got to do something about it, and I guess I'm going to step in. And so I often talk about, training, it's a learning system to both people and dogs. The more that you coach and guide your dog, the more that you see them become successful, the more that builds up confidence in what you're doing, so it makes you feel better, thus making your dog feel better about you. And it's just a lot of trust building on both sides. And unfortunately, the hard thing, like what's that saying? It takes a lifetime to build trust, but a moment to ruin it. It takes a lot for us to kind of get over some of those different things, whether it's our own previous traumas or own anxieties or anything like that. But just then one small little moment can, validates where those sort of things came from.
Absolutely.
There was no question there. I was just going on a rant, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's a good observation that at least the lady was able to feel it in herself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key. She's like, she was able to identify all my past stuff came flooding back. So the new dog that she has is obviously there to kind of ignite that for her, ignite the ability and the opportunity for her body to release that trauma, because it's in her cellular memory, it's in her fascia. Okay, and that little new dog knows that's there. Yeah. So he's going to act out, or she's going to act out, and create the opportunity for her to kind of go, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
I need to look at this, and because if I don't, it'll probably just get worse with this dog, and I don't want to go down that same road. I want this relationship to be different.
Yeah, absolutely. What sort of things do you instruct a pet parent to go through, if they feel like they're the ones who are contributing emotionally to their dog's issues?
Well, it's very specific. What I do is I try and switch on the light bulb within, so that they actually come to the realization that the dog is mirroring them, rather than me telling them that. So if the dog has cataracts, okay, the emotional pattern behind cataracts is no bright future to look forward to, right? That you're kind of living in darkness emotionally. And so if the dog has cataracts, then I will say to the person, okay, this is the possible emotional patterns behind cataracts. And then I have a guided meditation that I created that is me asking them a series of questions, taking them back to the first moment they met that animal, at whatever age that animal was, and exploring what was going on in your life. What attracted you to that animal? How was that animal behaving at that time? Is that any similar to you? And then they're also doing that meditation with the concept of cataracts in their mind, right? Of what would be the emotional cause. So by the time they pop out of that meditation, and most people do it, I'd say 8 out of 10 of my clients would do it. So they're the ones that get the most effective healing journey, right? But people are people. The other two, they'll get around to it when their soul is ready, right? Yeah. So some clients are more long-term, and that's okay. We get there in the end. So what happens though is once they've done that meditation, they kind of pop out, and it's like they've switched it themselves. Right. And of course, they're doing that meditation with their animal friend beside them. So the animal is sending them signals, sending them heart signals, supporting them in it, whether they realize it or not. And then what happens is they start to see it everywhere, right? So it just lifts the lid of that awareness. And it's not about people starting to feel guilty and starting to blame themselves. Oh my God, I'm making my animal sick. Because it's not just them. As you said, it's the diet, it's the environment, it's the chemicals, it's the genetics, right? There's all that to deal with. But we do deal with that. But then this is a whole other area, is like helping the person to heal. And then what happens is, when the animal selects the flower essences for their person, they're working on all this, but the person doesn't even know it. So they've got blind spots. So when I'm creating the flower essence mixes with the animals for their person, I then share it with the person, and I write out in a very specific way the emotional pattern that seems to be going on for them at this moment, that the dog can see or the cat can see. And when the people read those little paragraphs each month when they get their new essences on my 6-month program, they're like, oh my God, that's exactly where I'm at right now. How do they know? I'm just like, well, how could they not know?
No.
They're your shadow, and their hearts are so open, and they are unconditional love, and they are your biggest advocates. So they're your biggest advocates and your biggest teachers. And then sometimes when I send people those little paragraphs, it might trigger them, and they're just like, that's not me, da 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 da. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. That's okay, you know? And I just say, look, trust the animal wisdom. Have a go. Just take the essence, take it for 2 weeks, come back, read the paragraph and see if it makes sense then. Or wait 6 months and read back on these paragraphs and see where you are then. Because we're not always ready to see it right away. And that's how deep this work goes, right? And it's just, it's also a very, very, very challenging time for people. Like, people are losing the plot, right? And therefore so are the dogs. So it's all about being deeply compassionate and gentle. And I firmly believe that the people that are ready to do this deeper kind of work will gravitate towards me. Whereas the people that want the quick fixes or don't really want to do the work, they just want you to fix the dog, they wouldn't come anywhere near someone like me.
I hear you. I love
Yeah.
that. And I think that, again, you have beautiful sight. You must know what's coming up next, because my next questions were, tell us about your services. I mean, with listeners listening, if they're inspired, if they want to get in touch with you, what does working with you look like, and where can they find more about that?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, so my website is animalhealing.ie. And I do live animal communication sessions, which is a really nice way for people to test the waters with me. They're like, I work through the photo with the animal initially, and I get, as I call them, downloads from the animal for the animal and the person without looking at any information. It's just pure downloads. And then when we go on the call, we work through questions that their person has for the animal, and we do a live dialogue with the animal. And I'm also sharing what the animal wants for the person, and I'm sharing what the animal wants for themselves. And that's a really nice way to dip your toe into my work and really understand, am I the right person for you and your animal companion? Is this the type of work that you would like? Because you get a real good sample of it. And then if people want to go deeper, then I have my 6-month program, Happy Dog, Happy You, and Happy Cat, Happy You. And that's where we basically bring in all the Chinese medicine healing. We bring in all the botanicals they selected for you. So it's about taking the animal and yourselves on a journey of growth and healing. And also I give educational videos, short ones each month. So the person is also upping their game and learning how to be a better advocate for their animal, and knowing what alternative options are out there. What are the best diets? What are the best natural products? And I teach them, I give them a little home homeopathic kit that they can then work with and use at home and offer to their animal in a way of self-selection. So therefore, they have this kit at home that they can support themselves, their animal with. And it's just phenomenal, the program. I've had people change careers, start relationships, end relationships. One of my doggies recently graduated last week after 6 months. And before she worked with me, she was in the doggy out of hours emergency hospital, like a revolving door, because she had severe constipation, suspected megacolon, which is very tricky. And the vets, did their best, but kibble and steroids aren't going to fix that, right? But through the magic of the work that we did, and her guardian is absolutely incredible, and I collaborated with a homeopathic vet on this as well, Dr. Michael Clancy, and now she hasn't been to the vets in 2 months. She hasn't been to the vets in 2 months, and that after 2 years. 2 years of being in and out the vets all the time. So like, that's life changing.
Absolutely.
Life changing. So her dog mom is just recovering now. They're both recovering. They're at PTSD stage, trying to just relax their nervous system before we go again,
I love that so much. I think I might be calling you to maybe possibly book something for myself.
Yeah. Let's do it.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today on today's episode. I'll definitely be linking your website. And are you also on social media as well?
Yeah, so my social media is Animal Healing Lisa Tully. So yeah, you'll find me that way as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'll definitely be linking all that stuff in the show notes so that way the listeners can learn more about you and then hopefully book something with you. Because this sounds very, again, holistic in the sense that you're doing lots of different avenues, and it sounds very healing, and I know all of us can use a little bit of healing these days.
Yeah, and I just had a little idea there, Steph, see what you think about it, is that I have a free giveaway meditation, okay? And it's a meditation where, going back to what we said at the start of this call, asking the animal for a yes and asking the animal for a no. So it's actually a lovely guided meditation that gets you into the state and place where you're connected with your animal companion on a heart level. And you could use that meditation initially to kind of say to the animal, show me your yes and feel it in your body. Show me a no, feel it in your body. And then when you're not in a meditation state, then you try it again. So it becomes like second nature. And that could be a nice way for you and for listeners to work that muscle. So we can, if you want, we can include that in the show notes as well, a link to that. Yeah.
I think I did see that linked in your website. So I will do a link to the website and a link to that specific area as well.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Of course. All right, listeners, we will catch you guys on the next episode. I forgot where the stop button was. There it goes. Now, that might be the end of the episode, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. Follow us on social media. I'd love to connect with you. We have quite a few social media platforms. For nutrition and holistic pet care tips, follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Steph the Pro Dog Mom. You can find fun training tips on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Pup Pup and Away SA. If you're in San Antonio and you want to bring your dog to us for boarding, training, socialization, and nutrition, come find us. But if you're not in San Antonio, we do training and nutrition sessions virtually. Yes, they can be just as effective, I promise. Please rate, review, and subscribe to my podcast on whatever platform you listen on. And please, please, please share with a friend. The positive reinforcement of knowing people actually listen to this and find it valuable helps motivate me to keep on recording. We'll see you guys at the next episode.